And welcome to the Door County Library program on the Door County Treatment Court in conjunction with the League of Women Voters. Lisa Barnaby of the League will introduce the panel. Lisa.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We are excited to share information with you on the newly operational Door County Treatment Court. This program is brought to you by the League of Women Voters, and we want to thank the Door County Library for providing the Zoom platform. Again, my name is Lisa, and I'm one of the original members of the League study group. Several of us got together 3 years ago because we wanted to learn more about mental health, substance use, the criminal justice system, and how citizens of Door County were affected. We spent several years interviewing local agencies and nonprofits. We studied available information, learned an incredible amount, and identified several areas that we continue to explore further. We invite you to go to the League of Women Voters website and read the paper we wrote and view the video we made. During our research, we interviewed each of the participants here today. The treatment court was in its planning stages, and we were impressed with the degree of cooperation that we found across agencies and departments. We are excited to be able to learn more about the treatment court today. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat box and we will address them at the end. I'm happy and honored to introduce Judge David Weber, District Attorney Colleen Nordin, Sheriff Tammy Sternard, and Kelsey Christensen. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and then help us learn more about the court. Judge Weber, I will start with you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Weber. I'm a circuit court judge in Branch 2 in Door County. I've been a judge now for about 5 years. And I didn't know, do you want us each to go around at this time? I guess, why don't we do that? Colleen, why don't you go? Tammy, then Kelsey, and then I'll come back to me.
That sounds great. Thanks,
Good morning,
Judge.
everybody. My name is Colleen Nordin. I am the Door County District Attorney. I'm just beginning my second term as the District Attorney here in Door County. Prior to that, I was in private practice, practicing criminal law and family law.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tammy Sternard. I've been the sheriff now for about 2 years. I've been with our department since 1993. I guess I'm dating myself, but I spent a large majority of my career working with incarcerated individuals. So I see firsthand kind of the total picture of how we address drug-related issues, and then kind of like the collateral effects, not just to the individual, to the community. So I am very passionate about being part of the team here and excited about where it's going.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelsey Christensen. I am the Court Services Coordinator. I oversee our diversion programs, and I was part of implementing our treatment court. And so now my role with treatment court is the programmatic stuff as well as case management of our participants. Judge, I'll start sharing our presentation.
Right, we're all very happy to be here to talk to you about our newly created treatment court. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time telling you how the treatment court got into being, but suffice it to say that all of us, including everybody that's here today on our panel, and especially some other people that aren't here today, people like Joe Krebsbach, Donna Altapeter, have spent about 3 years on this project. We've been at this for about 3 years trying to get a treatment court up and running. We've had countless meetings. We've had trainings. We've had to apply for grants. We've gone to visit treatment courts and witness them in operation. And I should say, with the exception of Kelsey, none of us is paid for this. We're doing this all on our own time. We fit our treatment court into our regular schedules. And we're doing this because we think it's the right thing to do. We've had some challenges, and we'll talk about some of our ongoing challenges a little bit later, not the least of which has been the pandemic, which has prevented us from meeting in person. So for about the last year, we've been meeting virtually, just like everybody else in the world. But I'm happy to say that in December of 2020, we accepted our very first participant into our treatment court. And we have an operational treatment court in Door County now after about 3 years. We were told to speak for about an hour here today. That's what we're going to shoot for. Of course, we'll take any questions at the end and hopefully can answer any of those questions. We hope you'll come away with this session with number one, an idea of what a treatment court is, why we instituted one in Door County, how a treatment court works and who is eligible to participate, some frequently asked questions, and some of the ongoing challenges that we have going forward. We're not going to get into the very complex and I think interesting issue of what substance abuse is. We hope to do that more in October when we speak again and have somebody actually who's been through the treatment court there at that time. We're going to focus a little bit more on the law enforcement side of things today. Now, while we're not going to speak about substance abuse too much in detail, obviously we're going to touch on it. We all know on this panel that it's real. I practiced law for about 29 years before I became a judge, and I did mainly civil litigation. I dealt with pretty much sophisticated people with money. And I knew that when I took this job, I was going to be dealing with the criminal justice system. And like a lot of other people, I had stereotypical notions about what defendants were like. I was shocked to learn in very short order that the vast majority of them, certainly way above 50% of them, have very significant substance abuse disorders and mental health issues. And I was also a little bit surprised by how significantly drugs had infiltrated this sort of idyllic community that we have called Door County. And I think that's a perfect place to start with the drug patterns that we see in Door County. I'm not sure everybody is as naive as I was. And I'm not saying I was totally naive about that, but I think we should turn it over now to Colleen and Tammy to talk a little bit about the drug patterns and start there before we return to the issue of the treatment court. So Colleen and Tammy.
Thank you, Judge. As we go through, we're not going to be reading from the PowerPoint. That's for you to be able to review while we're speaking. I can tell everybody that when it comes to substance abuse issues, I agree with what Judge said. The majority or a significant portion of the defendants that we see come through the system are dealing with some sort of a substance abuse issue. And what I think has been surprising to a lot of folks who may not be part of the criminal justice system is the type of drugs and issues that we're seeing here in Door County. When I started as DA, the trend was leaning towards growing heroin use. And for a while that was the trend. And of course, everybody knows how dangerous and how addictive heroin is. The trend then veered a little bit more into the methamphetamine world, where methamphetamine became more available. It seemed as we were dealing with one type of drug, a new one would pop up. And I think now what we're seeing is a combination. Methamphetamine is a drug that is cheaper, can be cheaper than heroin, is more addictive, and I think has some significant collateral consequences, as does heroin. Unfortunately, even more recently, we've been seeing the introduction of fentanyl into this drug system that we have. So now, to couple with the dangerousness of things like heroin and methamphetamine, folks are finding themselves purchasing and using fentanyl, maybe unknowingly, often unknowingly. So the problem is growing and it's spreading very quickly. I'll turn it over to Sheriff Sternard for her comments.
Thank you, Colleen. As Ms. Nordin said, the increase in methamphetamine use is something that, is very it's fluid, right? So the drug of choice, changes, but that primarily is what we're seeing right now. For those of you that don't know, we do have a dedicated drug investigator with our department who works the drug task force. I just asked him for a little bit of a background of, his perception on this, and really we're starting to see other crimes that are coming up as a result of one's drug addiction. So there's been an increase in sex-related crimes, individuals doing things that they may not otherwise have done, to try to get the drugs they need. And then also statewide, there is a little bit of an uptick on cocaine and crack again. So we kind of monitor that very closely. Like I said, we have our Door County Drug Task Force, and we have that dedicated officer. So, I think the treatment court is something that just with our drug task force already, it gives us options when we start interacting with these people early on. We have options to try to help them deal with it better than we've ever had before.
Thank you, Sheriff Sternard and DA Nordin. So let me turn then to the issue of what is a treatment court. And I think to answer that question, let me start by, I guess, reviewing what happens to somebody at sentencing. We are supposed to, as judges, prefer probation above all. Certainly there are very serious crimes that are committed that probation is not appropriate for. But unless it unduly diminishes the seriousness of the offense, we are supposed to put somebody on probation. What does that mean? That means that we withhold sentence and place them on probation subject to certain conditions. They are then released to the Department of Corrections. They get an agent there who administers or oversees that person. Some of the typical conditions of probation would be full-time employment, full-time schooling, doing what's called a compass evaluation, which would identify any sort of needs that they might have. And then programming after that, AODA counseling, pay any fines or restitution, do community service as an example. These are all conditions of probation. And the agent, the DOC, the Department of Corrections agent, sees that person on a periodic basis to make sure that that person is in compliance. So if the person is on probation, as an example, for 2 years, at the end of that 2 years, he or she should have completed all of the things required. And for those that do well on probation, it works marvelously. Those people do all the things that they're supposed to do, presumably get some supervision. Well, they do get supervision and presumably get some rehabilitation, and then are released back into the community, and all is good. But there's a certain subset of people that do very poorly on probation, and those are the people that we're going to talk about today. And those are people that have a very significant substance abuse problem. They often do not have the ability to complete the conditions of their probation. They are usually not structured. They don't have the discipline to do the things that they have to do. Moreover, they don't have the oversight from the agent that that they really need, because the agent only sees these people periodically. The least restrictive probation is like 4 times a year. But lots of times they'll see these people maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks at the very most, or maybe like once a month. Well, if you have a very serious substance abuse problem, that's not a whole lot of oversight. And these people get off track very soon. And then before you know it, these people are revoked from probation. We get a packet, we meaning the judges get a packet. The district attorney gets a packet saying John Doe is being revoked off the probation for violating the conditions of the probation. Absolute sobriety, not using substances, illegal substances is often a condition of probation. Not committing any other crimes, well, just possessing or using these materials or these substances is a crime, so often they get revoked and they're returned to the court. And at that point in time, the court has no other alternative. We can't say to this person, you know, we're going to put you back on probation. We mean it this time, and we want you to, you know, comply. We have no other alternative but to sentence them at that time, and that usually means incarceration. And for the people that we're talking about, it usually means prison. And what we know for sure happens in prison, and I'm not here to, you know, say anything bad about prisons. I think they're wonderful places in many respects, but we know that these types of people don't typically get the programming they need. They don't get the treatment that they need. And so they might be compliant or not using while they're in prison. But if they're in prison for 2 or 3 years, as an example, and they come out after having not used, they don't have any of the skills that they need to cope with their life outside of prison. And the studies show that almost always they just begin using again, lots of times to disastrous effects. They're accustomed to using a certain amount of drugs, as an example, heroin or something like that. They begin using at that level and sometimes just overdose and die. We know that prison isn't a particularly good way of dealing with these people. So, and yet, as things stand right now, without a treatment court, we have no other alternative. We have no other alternative but to put them in prison. So enter the treatment court model. The treatment court model, in a nutshell, is sort of like probation plus. It's a much more highly intensive supervision program where somebody will enter the treatment court with this type of problem. They will have a high substance abuse problem, and they will have a high risk of reoffending. And they will be given very intensive supervision in the form of daily contacts from the coordinator. They will have to give UAs, that's urinalysis examples, randomly, at least 3 times a week. They will have to appear in front of the court before the judge and have a colloquy with the judge once a week. And they typically have to get employment and secure housing. And it's simply a very intensive supervisory process where they are held accountable literally on a daily basis to the treatment court. Now, we call ours the treatment court because, but our particular court is a drug court at this point in time. I want to emphasize before we turn over, I'll let Ms. Nordin make a few comments too, but I want to emphasize that this isn't some sort of brainchild that we came up with. Right now, that there are between 90 and 100 treatment courts in Wisconsin alone. They don't all just deal with drugs. Some of them deal with mental health. There's veterans courts. We call them specialized courts. Veterans courts, some of them break them down by drug. There's opioid courts, OWI courts, various courts. And there's over 90, there's about 90 to 100 specialized courts already in Wisconsin. These are evidence-based programs. There have been studies done. There are best practices that are known both at the federal and state level that we are obligated to employ, and we do so. We call ours a treatment court because inevitably these folks get treated not only for substance abuse, but also for other problems such as mental health. Colleen, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that this isn't a diversion program.
Certainly. And while we do have diversion programs, that's a presentation for a different day. We do have adult and juvenile diversion programs here in Door County, but I think where a lot of people in the community may be misunderstanding what treatment court is, and so you hear people think of it as maybe a soft approach to crime. In fact, in our treatment court and in most treatment courts, I would venture to guess, the individual actually has to plead and be convicted of at least one felony. And they've already been charged with felonies. So we find these folks based on our knowledge of their history, the types of crime that they're before the court on. And we work with their defense attorney. Of course, it's a voluntary program. And if they're eligible, they actually are convicted of a felony and they're placed on probation for a period of 3 years. And then as a condition of probation, along with all of the other conditions that Judge talked about earlier, they have a condition that they have to satisfactorily complete or graduate from the treatment court program. And again, they have opted into this process. They've chosen to apply for and hopefully be accepted into treatment court. But it does have that conviction that comes along with it. And then that component of probation, such that if they're not successful on probation for whatever reason, whether it's being terminated from treatment court or being revoked from probation for something else, there is the possibility that they would either be sentenced to incarceration in the county jail or to a period of incarceration at the state prison system. So I think it's important that people understand that this is a conviction-based treatment court program so that the person is in fact convicted of that crime. And very likely the person has been in the system before, just based on the criteria for which they need to qualify to be eligible. But I would also emphasize, oh, go ahead, Judge.
Well, just a couple of things. So the two main ways they get into the treatment court then would be is if Ms. Nordin and the defense counsel identify somebody that they think would be appropriate. And Kelsey's going to talk a little bit in greater detail about the mechanics here. And then they just get referred. And then as a condition at the plea stage, they would plead to a felony, and then they would be placed on probation. And a separate condition of their probation would be that they successfully complete the treatment court. The other way is what I alluded to, is if they're already on probation and are failing miserably, and the agent recommends as an alternative to revocation, because remember, once they're revoked, then it's too late. We have to sentence them and then they're probably going to prison. But as an alternative to revocation, they recommend the person into the treatment court. And then of course, the treatment court has to review all of these applicants and approve this. I think that's a perfect time for Kelsey then to talk about some of the mechanics and do a little deeper dive into what the treatment court looks like in terms of its makeup, who participates, and how it works. Kelsey? Thank
you, Judge. All right. So something I just want to point out to everybody before I go too much into mechanics is what's really unique about treatment court is the team of people that sit and oversee our participants. So we've got the judge, we've got Department of Corrections representatives, we've got the district attorney, the sheriff, somebody from the public defender's office, myself, treatment providers, and we also have an evaluator that sits on to make sure that we're doing things by the standards. But what makes that so unique is that this is for the first time, usually in someone's life, they have a team of people supporting them, which is what makes us the most successful, is that they have, 8 to 10, 12 people who are there every week to cheer them on and say, if we clap, hey, you got through this week, you have so many days sober. And it's a truly collaborative effort that wouldn't have been able to happen if we didn't have everybody on board. So it's a very unique, very cool experience for, our participants, as well as for each of us as well. So our treatment court qualifications, You guys can kind of see this. I don't necessarily want to read all of these to you. We already talked about the felony or drug-related felony property offense. They do have to be 17 years or older, as well as a resident of Door County. One of the things that I'll talk about a little bit here is I also do a recidivism risk screening on them. So what that means is, are they at risk to continue on in the criminal justice system? So they have to be a high needs for that. And the reason we do that is because these are the type of people, as the judge was talking about, that really need that high attention. So they're having constant check-ins with myself, as well as probation and everyone else. So that's why we have to do that, to make sure that they meet that needs. And they also do have to show moderate to severe substance use disorder. Some of the things that we do not have in there is a history of or an offense that shows as an enterprise trafficker. I don't know, Colleen, if you want to touch on that for a hot minute there.
So we don't include people in the program who are, your typical, what you would imagine as a drug dealer, somebody who is dealing, and we call them an enterprise trafficker or enterprise dealer, someone who is dealing for the purpose of making profit. So someone who is dealing at large quantities, really solely for that profit component, versus somebody who may have what we call middled a drug deal, because they are also called a hand-to-mouth dealer. So somebody who might sell some methamphetamine, a small amount, in order to be able to get some for their own addiction. So there's a difference between somebody who might be charged with a delivery of methamphetamine in that small quantity, when we know the circumstances of that delivery is related to their own addiction, versus that larger quantity drug trafficker. That drug trafficker, that larger quantity, is not eligible to participate in the program.
Thanks, Colleen. We do have some other disqualifications as it relates to felony of bodily harm against another person or using a weapon against another person. These actually come from the state. The reason we have to adhere to that is because we received a grant through the Department of Justice, and these are some of their requirements on their end. So that's why that falls, as well as we cannot have registered sex offenders, or they can't have any pending charges in nature related to that. And we also right now are not accepting someone with a debilitating mental illness into the treatment court. So I just want to clarify that really quickly, is that we all know, well, most people know that with substance use, there generally tends to be it's dual diagnosis. They usually have some mental health with them as well. So we're not saying that we won't be treating mental health. We do that quite often. But this is for those people who might suffer from something severe as schizophrenia. Those are things that we hope in the future we might be able to create a separate track of our treatment court that might help, we call it mental health court, so that we can give those people that attention that they need specific to those needs. But that is our future hope. So Colleen, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about I guess you did talk a little bit about your referral when you are reaching out.
So, as the prosecutor, we obviously see all of the referrals from law enforcement agencies. We see all of the cases that go through the system. And we are seeking participants. We're looking for the appropriate participants. And so I'm in a position where, seeing all of the cases, I'm able to identify who might be eligible. However, a referral from my office is not the only way that a person can apply for the program. The public defender, who we work closely with, or any defense attorney, can contact me or contact Kelsey and say, I've got this individual who I think might be appropriate. Would you consider them for the program? They have to get through an initial screening to make sure that they're not ineligible for one of those few criteria that Kelsey just went through. But otherwise, a lot of these and most of these referrals are either coming from my office in collaboration with the defense attorney, or from the defense attorney then referring them to me.
And then once I get those referrals, like I spoke about earlier, I do a assessment on them to make sure that they meet those high needs that we are working with. once I do that assessment with them, then I will refer them over to our treatment providers over at Department of Health and Human Services, and they will conduct a AODA, other alcohol and other drug assessment on our participant, just to again make sure that they meet that medium to high substance use disorder. Once that's all done, I compile all the information and I bring it back to our team to inform them of where we're at with our participant. And then our team will actually take a vote to make sure that this is an individual we feel we can take into our program. We take some things into account when we're talking about our participants, such as what is the aftercare going to look like? So now they're going to plead guilty. What do we need to be doing with these people as far as treatment goes? So we have had instances where we do need to send them to residential treatment. So we need to have those discussions prior to them coming into the court process to make sure that we are at a level to provide that care for our participants. So then once they, once our team takes that vote, we notify the participant, we notify the participant's defense attorney, and then they go ahead with those, the plea with the judge. Treatment court is held every Monday at 1 p.m. and treatment court is a big commitment from people. It's kind of everyone's saying that it's not soft on their crime, because it is a big commitment. It is a minimum of 14 months, and that's the minimum. I mean, we're finding that it's actually, for most of our participants, it's going to be much longer than the 14 months. And there's 5 different phases of treatment court. I won't break all those down for you right now, but essentially it's how you would picture it. The first couple of phases are pretty intense. A lot of touches with probation, with myself, with having to appear for court once every week. So they are having a lot of contact. As they progress and as they're showing us that they're able to start doing those things like provide, get a job, have housing, make some good friends, have some good pro-social contacts, some good pro-social activities, then those requirements start to kind of lessen a little bit. So they're able to, have a little bit more of that freedom to, they're not meeting with me weekly. They might be meeting with me every other week. But in order for them to go on to the next phase, they do have to complete an application to write to us to say, hey, I think I'm ready for this. And they tell us why. And so some of those questions on there might be how, what have you done this phase? What are some of your struggles? What's something that you're afraid of for next phase? So it's a really cool opportunity for them to be honest about where they're at in their level of recovery and how they feel that they can move forward with their recovery. So again, this is a very unique program in that we are all very, we're very much so on working on this together. They have a huge team supporting them on this every day. They do have to have, it's intensive case management with myself, as well as our, if they do qualify for the community comprehensive services as well. They have probation, treatment, and as Judge talked about, throughout their entire programming, they do have random urinalysis 2 to 3 times per week throughout their entire program. So that does not change, lessen at all. And again, that's a lot for that validity of making sure that they are staying, showing that they are staying in their recovery. And that's something that's an evidence-based practice done throughout the nation with our treatment courts. But it is a really great program. By the time that they are in their final phases, they're able to show us that they have, maintained gainful employment. They're either working or they're going to school for something that they want to proceed and, make a career out of. They're coming back to our community as, really, good law-abiding citizens. They're able to show some pro-social activities, have those friends that we talked about, maintaining actual stable living, which is not something easy for most of our substance abuse users. So it's a very unique program in that it allows, gives them that support to get there. And by the end, they're able to do it on their own, which is very unique.
So let me just touch on, and just to emphasize, rather than be sitting in jail or prison, these people are actually out in the community. Not necessarily in this community yet, but somewhere they're receiving treatment and they're getting they're out in the community working and developing, not only getting their counseling and going to group sessions for their substance abuse and mental health issues, but they're also working, getting a job and doing the things that they have to do on a daily basis. And Kelsey's in constant contact with them, especially in the initial phases. They have to report to her every day, and she's checking in on them every day. So it's just hyper supervision. These are people that need behavioral modification. Okay. And the idea here is to change their behavior through intensive supervision by doing the things that all of us have to do. Be on time, attend meetings regularly, don't miss work, do all of the things that we have to do. And Kelsey's there to not only monitor these things, but to help them do that.
Judge, if I could just touch, there's a couple of questions and I think they're falling in right where we are right now in the conversation. But one thing that I don't think we've talked about yet is what it looks like from the treatment court team's perspective. So Kelsey stays in contact with the participant all week long. Their probation agent does, their counselors stay in contact, and then Kelsey and the probation agent and the counselors are constantly making sure that they are up on what's happening with each participant. And then on Mondays, before we actually call the cases for court, the team gets together. Kelsey puts together a report how the last week went on that individual. How many days sober do they have? What struggles did they have that week? What accomplishments did they have that week? And we tailor each participant's treatment process to what they need. We find them where they're at. So one of the questions was, do they have difficulty finding employment? Well, that's something that we work on, and we hope to partner with some employers here in the community. As if we have somebody who's struggling finding employment as a group, we're trying to network and find somebody who might be willing to work with that individual. There's a question about if somebody has, say, a learning disability or difficulty with comprehension or filling out these forms and applications, we will meet that person where they are. So if we find we think we found somebody who's appropriate for the court and they're not able to fill this form out, then Kelsey will help them fill it out, or their attorney will help them fill it out. If we've got somebody who has some cognitive issues, then we're going to get those identified, help get them treatment. And instead of giving them homework this week that might require, writing an essay about their goals for the following week, we might just have them tell us what their goals are. So when we talk as a group and as a team prior to calling the case, we are really getting specific, and we really get to know these participants, what their struggles are. This person quit smoking this week. This person had a great week with their counselor. This person is thinking of changing jobs or picking up more hours, or finding an apartment is a struggle. So we really get to know them and work with them on all of these different aspects of their lives so that we can tailor the support to what they need.
And then I'll just touch on briefly my role as a judge. It's 180 degrees almost from what I typically do. It's a non-adversarial court proceeding. They do appear in court. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we haven't had people here literally in my courtroom, which is better. The studies show that appearing in front of the judge and the team is most effective, but we appear virtually and the entire team is there. That means Sheriff Sternard, law enforcement, Colleen, Kelsey, certainly, the DOC people, and the idea is it's a non-adversarial. We're trying to be extremely positive with these people. Keep in mind what Kelsey said earlier. Most of these people have never had any sort of positive role models in their lives. And it's the idea here is that they come to appreciate the fact that we have vested or invested so much time in them that they essentially get to the point where they don't want to let us down. They become habituated into doing the things that they're supposed to do, and we give them a reward. And my goal is to be uplifting and positive with them and encourage them, congratulate them when they do things that are good. And I have to sometimes sanction them if they, obviously do something that is beyond the pale or are deceitful or dishonest. Obviously, that requires a sanction. But the main goal is this is not, we don't haul them in front of the judge and grill them sort of thing. It's a very positive, it's designed to be a positive experience where we are reinforcing good choices and discouraging and trying to get them to see why bad choices are counterproductive. So Kelsey, I don't know what else you wanted to say. You maybe want to go over some of these numbers?
Yeah, we definitely can. So, this is something that, as the judge has commented a couple of times now, this is something that is evidence-based. This isn't just, we didn't just decide to make this up on our own. This is something that is coming from, we actually had a really great training with the National Institute of Justice ourselves, that we were very privileged to have that training. And so these are some of the reports that are coming back from those numbers. But there is a lot of evidence to show that treatment court provides that ability, like the judge has said, to help the people to change those habits so that they can create healthier, better habits. So there is a huge decrease in crime activity. There's a decrease in rearrests. There's a decrease in drug use, which is our biggest thing that we're trying to accomplish here. And they do have, therefore are having less positive screens, with our drug urinalysis to make sure that they're adhering to that. And one thing I will point out is it's hard to sometimes capture those numbers because there is such a collateral that happens when when you have somebody in the system, there's, the societal thing of, they might have children, those children are taken away from that person. So there's a lot of cost that comes with somebody who is using and is putting into and being brought into the system. But because of things like treatment court, we are able to, we're able to reunify them with their children. We're able to have them working instead of, in prison. So there is some great cost savings there. And so the National Institute of Justice did a study that actually showed it saved an average between the 5,680 to 6,208 per offender overall. So imagine there's, I think I had a number out there before of how many people go into the system in the beginning. So that's a lot of money totaling that we're saving on our for our justice system and for our community.
So just a couple of points real quickly. The collateral consequences, I think, needs to be stressed. The truth is, and I think Colleen alluded to this, the truth is we see a lot of these people many times. This isn't their first rodeo. We see them many times in many different ways. One is just through the criminal justice system itself. They've had numerous criminal arrests, and they continue to do the same thing. So there are all of those resources that come to play, but often they have family situations, whether that be domestic abuse injunctions or harassment injunctions that we have to deal with that play into this. Then they have children. So the juvenile justice system, the CHIPS cases, for example, when children are temporarily taken away from their parents because they can't or are unable to care for them. So one person could have a cluster of different cases or types of cases around him or her that we all deal with. And the idea here is to come together, have all the stakeholders that deal with all of these things and try to deal with it deal with it in a more productive way, rather in a unified way, and not sort of piecemeal. But I also want to just mention, we talked about high risk, high need people. We don't put low offenders in this type of a program. You don't put somebody in a treatment court that gets caught with a couple of joints, as an example. They're low offender people. It's kind of an absurd example. As we've been saying, these are all felony cases. They have to have enough skin in the game. The downside of not succeeding has to be very grave, and that is prison, essentially. Because if it's not, if they can just do 3 months in jail, in the county jail, for example, it's a lot easier for these people to do something like that than to go through the treatment court for 2 years, or at least 14 months, as Kelsey said. So we're not talking about low offenders, we're talking about high offenders, but we're not talking about violent people. Any type of violent crime that makes them ineligible. We're not talking about sex offenders, ineligible. We're not talking about enterprise drug dealers, as Colleen referred to, your prototypical drug dealers, not available, not eligible. We're talking about a very specific group of people that have a high substance abuse, and they have a high likelihood of reoffending. I don't know if this is time for me to get into some of the frequently asked questions. I know that there was a question, a couple of questions that I think we can turn to. One of the questions is, why isn't this just handled by the DOC? This is essentially what we're saying here, is that this is a group of people that don't do very well on supervision. They don't do very well on the standard supervision, probation. And it's certainly nothing against the DOC, but I just don't think that they have the resources to see people on a day-to-day basis and give them the type of oversight that we are giving them. And as I said, the most lenient probation is seeing somebody 4 times a year. Now, I know that they see people a lot more often than that for more serious things, but still, it's not an everyday thing. And for these types of people, they need oversight on a daily basis, at least to begin. And then there's something that we've all learned about and read in the literature. I'm not sure that we've experienced it yet ourselves. There's something about the chemistry of the courtroom that all of the people that are involved in treatment courts talk about, that them appearing in front of a court, in front of a judge with the team there, has a gravity about it that they don't get when they just show up to their probation agent at the local probation office. When they have to appear in court every week, at least to begin, and essentially have a colloquy with the judge, and admittedly, hopefully that's a positive colloquy, it's a positive thing, there's still a gravity to the situation that all of the experts say contributes to the success of the program. That's why this isn't just simply a matter deferred, to the DOC to be dealt with by the DOC. Another question is it cost effective? I think Kelsey hit on that. The numbers, one of the most frustrating things that I experienced getting into this is trying to get those types of numbers. It's very difficult to get those sorts of numbers because it depends on how you define certain things, but we alluded to some of those already. The myriad of types of cases that these people get involved in. If they can straighten out their lives and if they can get relatively sober and become functioning, the idea is the juvenile cases, the CHIPS cases, the domestic abuse cases, and obviously the criminal cases are going to go down. But I think I need to tell you it's an anecdotal story by our chief judge, James Morrison up in Marinette. He got a treatment court started up there about 8 years ago, I guess. They had a very, very serious problem with heroin in Marinette. They're sort of on the pipeline up from Chicago, Milwaukee, through the valley, up into Canada. And they got hit with the heroin epidemic, about 10 years ago. And so he got a treatment court running there. And he tells us that they've had 6 sober babies born in their treatment court, meaning 6 babies that were not addicted to women who were sober because they were in the treatment court. Now, the statistics will tell you that an addicted baby, an infant that's born addicted to a substance, over the course of his or her lifetime will cost approximately $1 million in all of the types of services that they get. And they've had 6 babies born without addiction. So figure that out. It's quite profound, not to mention that you don't necessarily measure the success of all of this with simply dollars. I think that would be a sort of crass way of looking at it. If we can save people, if we can save them from this wretched life, then I think that is a good thing, and maybe justification alone. We mentioned the soft on crime thing. Just to mention that again, some people ask, is this soft on crime? This is not a diversion program. And what they have to do is so intensive that that's why we need very serious crimes involved. Because if these were just misdemeanors where they could spend 3 months in jail, many of these people would gladly do that rather than be in the treatment court. This is no picnic. They have intensive supervision, and it's not easy for them. And some people talk about the success rate. They ask about the success rate. And I think that again depends on what kind of drug we're talking about. Depends on the person, and there's no doubt that we're going to have people that fail. Every treatment court does, and failure means that we're going to sentence them and they're going to go off to prison. But there's no doubt also that many people have succeeded in these types of programs. So I think we want to end then. We've crammed a lot of information, and the 4 of us haven't done this together before. So we've done the best we can, but I think we want to end here by talking about where we are now and some of our challenges. We've talked about some of the steps that we've taken to get here. But Kelsey, I don't know if you want to start with what you think from your perspective. What are some of our major challenges going forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges are some of our challenges that Door County faces, just in itself, are the housing. Housing is a really big challenge for people in general in Door County, but on top of that, now we have people who do have drug felonies. So they are not eligible for some housing assistance. Some housing assistance is actually specific, says if you have drug felonies, you cannot receive this. So we do have a huge struggle with that, trying to find them a stable housing with people in our community who are willing to work with our participants. So that's a big one for us. We also do not, as many people know, we don't have a residential treatment as well as sober living. And so some of those things are really important for our participants, because right now we have to send them away, right? We have to send them out to a different community to get sober. And then we try to bring them back to this community, and they haven't built those supports. So I talked a little bit about those pro-social, those pro-social supports, recovery people, as well as activities. So now they're learning all that in a different community. Then we're bringing them back to Door County, and them then having to relearn that in our community is a struggle, because we don't have those resources that we need for our participants. So it's kind of a getting the community on board to understand the importance of helping our people who are struggling with substance use to return back to Door County, or to actually be able to have those be able to do their treatment from Door County. Those are some of the bigger things. Employment we touched about as well. Luckily we've got some good people out in our community that are willing to work with people who do have those felonies. But again, it's just trying to find those stable resources for our participants is a constant struggle.
Yeah, I think our employment situation is better than a lot of counties. We have a type of population, although it's not the greatest population in that they might associate with other people who are using. Their employers are willing to work with people, especially if they're in the treatment court. They like the idea that there's the supervision over these people. I think our biggest single issue is housing, and that's not unique to us. I mean, housing's a problem in Door County generally, but having these people being able to live outside of the situation that got them in trouble, I shouldn't say got them in trouble, but is associated with their trouble, whether that be hanging out with their friends or their family or whatever, getting them away from that and living in a sober situation is, I think, one of our biggest problems. And our dream would be to have a residential treatment facility in Door County. I think that would, that is a big bite to take but just to have a sober living facility where people can go and live and know that other people there are sober, and maybe have group sessions there or AA meetings or something like that, would be a huge thing. And I think it's doable, but we need to work on that, and we certainly are looking for help to do that long term. I think finances are always going to be a struggle. We have what's called a treatment and diversions grant, treatment alternatives and diversions grant from the state, which really enabled this to really happen. I should say that Sheriff Sternard and Joe Krebsbach were absolutely instrumental in tweaking their budgets to get some money to pay Kelsey initially. Without their help in that regard, this wouldn't have happened. But then we got the treatment alternatives and diversion grant when it became available, which is funding this. But I mean, ideally, long term, we would like to obtain funding to support this in case that ever ran out. So that's, I think, a longer term thing. We have some great questions that we should turn to. I think I would just say some takeaways to just conclude here, and then we can answer some of these questions. And my computer's, of course, locking up. This is an evidence-based program. There are many studies supporting it and so on. It's not a panacea. I want to make that point. This is not for everybody. We've tried to identify those people that we think it's for. It's not for everybody. It's not appropriate for every single defendant. It's an example of collaborative justice. It's the idea that various stakeholders, the judiciary, law enforcement, the Department of Corrections, the Department of Health and Human Services, we all deal with these people in one form or another. And it's essentially us sitting down and saying, is there a better way to deal with these people that might help all of us? It's collaborative justice, and it's an attempt at doing that. It is also, I want to point out, just one of various programs that have been implemented recently in Door County. We got something going called a Criminal Justice Collaboration Committee, the CJCC. But there are other programs that are started that this is just one example of. And I have to say that most of these were initiated by Sheriff Sternard. She's done just an absolutely excellent job. One of them is Operation Fresh Start. That's for incarcerated people. It's to give them skills that when they get out of the Door County Jail, they can go and apply for jobs and hopefully get jobs and help them. So giving them skills while they're here and they're not just sitting here. She was instrumental in helping us get a pretrial release program. When many people appeared in front of the circuit courts, they would have a cash bond put on their head, and that was it. You got $5,000 cash bail, and they couldn't post it. And so they would sit in jail. Well, we have a pretrial release program that has various tools to allow people to get out of jail while they're waiting for their case. That's what we want. That includes GPS monitoring. It includes alcohol monitoring. It includes a drug patch. If it's a drug situation, they wear a patch and they're monitored when they're out in the community. But the point is they're out in the community and they're not sitting in jail waiting for their trial. That we've referred to the pathways, the diversion. This is another program. This is for truly low level, typically younger people who have committed a very low level offense. Is there a way to not run them through the criminal justice system, but actually have them do some things, some rehabilitative things to have them diverted before they end up in the criminal justice system? These are the treatment court is part of a constellation of all of these types of programs that are collaborative in nature. They're evidence-based, and I hope a new way and maybe better way of dealing with some of these problems. It's not going to work for everyone. There will be people who fail our treatment court. They will go to prison, but we hope that it'll work for some, and this will justify our efforts. I don't know if anybody else had any concluding comments.
I guess
The one thing I would add, I'll just real quickly is where we are at also is we need community support. And we need the support of our local government in order to continue the program. So having folks like those who are listening today understand the program and hopefully support it, not only will that help the participants, but it'll help the program continue to grow, because it's hard to monetize this and sell it to, for example, our county board and say, we can save you this much money if you continue to fund the program. So much of it can't be monetized, and is just like Judge began the program. It's just the right thing to do. So hopefully with the community awareness, we can make sure that our leaders appreciate the importance of the program, whether or not we can make it work or sell it to them in a financial way. Sorry, Sheriff, go ahead.
You're fine. I guess I just wanted to follow up to that. Again, I've been in law enforcement a long time, and many of the individuals that we are dealing with or will be dealing with in treatment court have only entered the justice system one way, and they only know one way to go through it. I think what I like about the offering of treatment court, if applicable, it's not a one size fits all approach. We as a treatment team are really able to work closely with that person, identify individual needs, and then use evidence-based practices to try to get them hopefully to a point in their life where they want to go in a different direction. And whether right, wrong, or indifferent, many of them don't have a support system, or because of their behaviors, they've lost their support system. And for whatever reason, I think the people on the panel, they look to us as that support system, and to say, oh, Judge Weber cares about what happens to me. That is not something that they've ever experienced in the justice system. And just to speak to one of the questions, I understand everybody doesn't agree with the laws, but I know from a law enforcement perspective, If someone violates the law, we have to take action. I don't get to pick and choose what laws that we enforce, but what I do get to do is be part of something larger like this, where if something in the system is broken, at least we're trying to do something to make it better. Not saying what we're doing is 100% effective for everybody, but we're not just doing the same old, same old. We're trying to take different approaches that clearly are evidence-based and have been working in other communities for years. So I think it's a move in the right direction. I personally would like to thank everybody that's been involved and the support that we've received in our community, because it really, really is a team effort. And just wanting the community to understand it is a work in progress. Are we going to have to make tweaks as we move through it and design it for our own community? Absolutely. But I think whether it directly affects you today, it may not, or it may, but sometime in your life, it's going to affect you in some way, shape, or form. So we can either work together and try to take a better approach and just build upon, what other communities are doing. I think it's a smart way. I am no way, shape, or form soft on crime. I think this is a smart way to address it, both financially and both for the individual and our community, because there is a lot of collateral that unless you're in that, you don't realize because you just don't know. So again, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity, thank the community for the support, and my team members. Let's keep moving it forward.
And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for helping us to understand the treatment court. And this video will be available on the Door County Library YouTube channel, and it is available also on Facebook. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Are we done, or can we still answer questions?
We are still going if you'd like to answer a few more questions.
Well, I say a question here that I think is a really intriguing question. And the question is whether anybody in a leadership position at Door County and the treatment court has struggled with substance abuse or addiction, or has anybody in leadership position been incarcerated for drug use? And then goes on to talk about, I think the gist of it is, we would have empathy for the people that are in our court. Not to my knowledge, but I can tell you that I have had people very close to me with this problem, so it's not foreign to me, which is no doubt why I became interested in it, or at least one of the reasons I became interested in it. What we have been talking about from the beginning is having somebody in the recovery community on our courts, on our, on our treatment court team, for a variety of reasons. Those folks tend to be very insightful about how people are doing and insightful about their comments that they make about themselves or about others. And they also tend to know the resources that are available out in the community when we get to that point, and quite frankly, some of the dangers that are out in the community. And there's no question in my mind that at some point, sooner, I hope, rather than later, we are going to have somebody from the recovery community, meaning somebody who has struggled with these issues and is in recovery on our team for that very reason. I don't know if anybody else had any.
I agree, Judge.
Yeah, go ahead.
We are looking to add that component, and as far as on the team, to help us as a team best approach our participants, and then also to be able to help with that sort of mentoring component as well, because folks who struggle in the community, one thing they have to try to find is a new set or new group and a new set of support while they're now living a different type of life. So besides there being support groups that already exist, we are trying to add that component and find the right folks to join the team. There's another question, Judge, about how many participants can we facilitate. At this point, we started slow. We wanted to make sure that we had everything set up so that we could best handle each participant as we grew. There's not an end number of what the maximum is going to be, but we're growing. So we've got 2 participants right now. We started in December, and we're looking to add another participant this month, and hopefully one in April as well. And we'll grow to the capacity that we can manage. And that also depends, I think Kelsey could speak to this, on what resources are available. You know, we have participants who may need that inpatient treatment, and there might be a participant who can start out with that intensive outpatient treatment. So we'll meet them where they are, and our capacity is going to depend a little bit on what our participants look like and what their needs are.
Any final comments by anybody? It's a lot of information in a very short period of time, but we're going to be doing this again in October. So, and hopefully then we can talk a little bit more about substance abuse itself.
And I'll offer to, if anyone has, any further questions or anything, feel free to, you can always reach out to me, or, any of us are, as you can tell, we're all very passionate about this. So we'd love to, if there's any other further information that's needed.
Thank you all so much. The League of Women Voters really appreciates you being here today, doing this program for the county. It seems like it's really needed and very good. The League also will have this posted on our website if you're looking for it later. And we have a Gibraltar candidate form that we just posted. So thank you all for coming, for listening, and for those that are listening on Facebook too. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you. Bye.